An ordinary janitor ate super spicy chips and became a millionaire. Want the same? Then dive into our recap. Successful businessman Richard Montañez is convinced that whenever a Mexican hears the word hot, their mouth instantly starts to water. His story began back in 1966. Little Richard was growing up in California with his many brothers and sisters. Their life wasn't easy. The whole family worked hard in the vineyards, but they never complained and were grateful for what they had. Richard's father was a strict and hot-tempered man, but his mother and grandfather always stood up for the boy. At school, Richard met a girl named Judy. Both of them were teased by bullies just for being Mexican. One day, Richard decided to sell his homemade bean burritos to his classmates. He made his first 25 cents, and from then on, he started selling burritos to anyone who wanted one. That was the first time his piggy bank began to fill up. Richard went to the store to buy Judy some chocolate, but the boy was arrested. Since no one believed he had earned the money honestly, the cops assumed he had stolen it. That moment changed something in Richard. If everyone already sees me as a criminal, maybe I should just become one. Sadly, that was the reality for many Mexicans at the time. Few people believed they could be good, honest, and hardworking. Richard and Judy got married, got involved with local gangs, and started making money illegally, constantly getting into fights and running from the police. Before long, Judy became pregnant, and Richard stole a car for the woman he loved. He was arrested, but the judge gave him the most lenient sentence possible on one condition. Richard had to completely turn his life around and stay out of trouble. The protagonist agreed and kept his promise. A few years go by. Richard and Judy have their second child. Both of them are unemployed, so they live in deep poverty. Their children wear shoes full of holes, and when their fridge breaks down, all their food goes bad. Richard searches for honest work, but no one even wants to look at his CV. Nobody needs a Mexican man with no education. Eventually, even his close friends start calling him a loser because he can't provide for his own family. Desperate, Richard turns to his friend, a former troublemaker named Tony Romero. After some hesitation, Tony promises to help the protagonist get a job at Frito-Lay. Richard fills out a job application. Judy suggests he tweak his resume a bit, but the floor manager, Lonnie Mason, quickly catches the lie. Still, he agrees to hire Richard as a janitor. Now, the protagonist has a real, honest job. He's responsible for changing the fryer oil, cleaning tables, mopping floors, scrubbing chip sorting conveyors, and taking out the trash. Richard works hard and even helps his fellow employees. Every night, he comes home exhausted but delighted. Another workday begins. Richard eagerly studies how all the machines at the factory operate and bombards the maintenance engineer, Clarence Baker, with questions. The protagonist practically follows Clarence around, trying to learn everything he can about Frito-Lay's technologies. During lunch, Richard's co-workers explain the factory's unspoken hierarchy. Plant managers sit at a separate table. They have fancy houses, big money, plenty of champagne, and zero worries. Floor managers aren't quite as high up, but they carry a lot of responsibility. Machine operators are well respected, especially Clarence, who's been with the company the longest. Below them are the technicians, drivers, and packers. And at the very bottom, the janitors. Richard realizes he doesn't want to spend his whole life mopping floors and taking out the trash. He dreams of being as successful as Roger Enrico, the head of PepsiCo. This man built a company that became a marketing sensation and a serious rival to Coca-Cola. Incidentally, Enrico is also the CEO of Frito-Lay. During another lunch break, Richard sits down at Clarence's table and asks the man to become his mentor. At first, the engineer refuses, but a few delicious burritos make Clarence change his mind. Day by day, Richard learns more and more about the factory's machinery and technology, and before long, he starts operating some of the equipment on his own. Clarence realizes that Richard is highly capable, observant, and hardworking. Eventually, the protagonist is even named Employee of the Month. Unfortunately, an economic crisis soon hits the United States. The poor become even poorer, and Frito-Lay's stock price plummets. Richard continues working as a janitor, but his wages are cut, and once again, his family lives on the verge of poverty. Roger Enrico demands shorter shifts, mass layoffs, and the closure of several plants in an effort to keep the corporation from going bankrupt. Richard and his co-workers try not to dwell on the bad news, but the situation feels more and more hopeless with each passing day. Roger Enrico records a video message for all his employees. He admits the company is going through tough times, but insists that anyone can succeed if they start thinking like a CEO. These words deeply inspire Richard. One afternoon, Richard picks up his older son from school and notices that the boy has been beaten up. It turns out he's being bullied for being Mexican too. Richard tries to comfort his son and takes both kids out for elotes, Mexican-style street corn. His younger son, Stephen, tells his father he loves the spicy taste because it burns good. Mexicans really do love spicy food. That's no secret. And at that moment, a brilliant idea strikes Richard. He knows how to save Frito-Lay. The man rushes home and makes chili-coated chips. Richard is convinced that Frito-Lay needs to launch a spicy snack line for the Latino market. The protagonist shares the idea with Clarence and other co-workers, then takes home a large bag of unseasoned Cheetos to experiment with. Richard meets with his father. The man says he's found a job for his wayward son. Yes, it's another janitor position, but does Richard really deserve anything more? The two argue, and a fight nearly breaks out. Judy steps in to defend her husband, and the family drives home. Richard and Judy buy a variety of ingredients for chili sauce, including the hottest peppers they can find. They begin experimenting non-stop, trying to create the perfect spicy flavor for Cheetos. Little Stephen acts as their taste tester, sampling each batch and giving his opinion. Some of the chips turn out way too spicy. Meanwhile, scientists in Europe develop various chemical additives like monosodium glutamate. Richard and Judy continue their experiments. They test hundreds of chip variations with different seasonings and finally discover the perfect combination. These are flaming hot, yet incredibly delicious chips. A satisfied Richard heads to work, only to find out that more employees are being laid off that day. He approaches Lonnie and shares his idea. The man dismisses it as nonsense and tells Richard to stop wasting time on foolish things. Still, Richard is persistent. That evening, he sneaks into Lonnie's office and copies the phone number of the company's CEO, none other than Roger Enrico. Richard dials the stolen number and reaches Enrico's secretary. He begs her to put him through to her boss. After a moment's hesitation, the woman agrees. Enrico picks up the phone, stunned to learn that an ordinary janitor is calling him. Richard passionately tells the CEO about his revolutionary idea. When Enrico hears that the man was inspired by his motivational video, he agrees to try the spicy Cheetos and asks Richard to send him a sample. The protagonist puts together a package for the CEO and even prays before sending it out. Soon, Enrico receives an entire box of flaming hot Cheetos. He immediately needs water to cool the fire in his mouth. But at the same time, they taste amazing. Roger Enrico calls Richard and schedules a meeting with him at the factory in 2 weeks. Richard's bold move soon becomes known to his supervisors, and Lonnie loads the protagonist up with extra work to keep him too busy for nonsense. Richard is extremely nervous about his upcoming presentation and struggles to sleep at night. Judy supports her husband and helps restore his confidence. Richard reads books, learns economic terms, studies the company's history, and consults with Clarence. Judy picks out a tie for him, and Richard's father helps him tie it properly. The man admits he wasn't the best father, but he's truly proud of his son. Soon, a black limousine arrives at the Frito-Lay factory, bringing none other than Roger Enrico and his investors. Richard puts on his best suit and walks confidently toward the CEO. At first, he reads his speech from a piece of paper, and Enrico and the investors begin to lose interest. But then Richard stumbles and starts speaking from the heart. He talks about his new product with such sincerity and passion that Enrico agrees to take the risk and gives the green light to launch FLAMIN Hot Cheetos into production. Unfortunately, the chips with the new flavor aren't selling well for some reason. The decision is made to suspend their production. Richard is devastated. He turns to Clarence for advice, and his friend urges the protagonist not to lose hope. That evening, the power goes out in Richard's home. The protagonist's kids tell him they know why the new Cheetos failed. Nobody knows they exist. There's been no advertising at all. Richard reaches out to Tony and asks for help promoting the spicy Cheetos. He returns to work and tells his colleagues and supervisors that every Frito-Lay employee must use their skills to promote FLAMIN Hot Cheetos to everyone they meet. It's the only way to save their jobs. Richard's plan works. They start selling snacks right on the streets. Some of the product is given away for free, but the tactic pays off in full. FLAMIN Hot Cheetos fly off the shelves. Roger Enrico is thrilled. After seeing the latest sales reports, he calls the Frito-Lay factory and places a new order: 5 million bags of the new chips. The employees immediately get to work. 6 months pass. The production of FLAMIN Hot Cheetos is gaining momentum. Thanks to this, workers' salaries start to grow. Clarence receives the promotion he had long dreamed of, while Richard is still working as an ordinary janitor. Lonnie asks the protagonist to go upstairs and do a bit of cleaning. There, Richard runs into Roger Enrico. The CEO informs the protagonist that he's been promoted to Director of Multicultural Marketing. It's an incredible success. All of Richard's co-workers are genuinely happy for him. He truly earned it. The overjoyed protagonist enters his new office, sits down at his desk, and calls his beloved Judy to share the great news. Richard firmly believes that in this world, there are no just janitors, just waiters, just assistants, or just valets. We all write our own stories and shape our own destinies. The main character became a top executive at PepsiCo and launched an entire spicy food industry. Today, the FLAMIN Hot Cheetos brand is worth billions of dollars.